Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair. So this is the 147th episode of the show, and since we're only 3 episodes away from the big 150, I want to do something to commemorate it. Something big. So I got to thinking, and I realized I say the phrase, "We'll get back to this series at some point in the future," or some variation thereof, and then a lot of the time, I don't. And that's not fair to these series, especially considering that some of them are ones that I promised for a while and just abandoned. So welcome, my friends, to Sequel Month. Over the next month, instead of holiday-themed offerings, we're going to look at books that are sequels to books that have come before. Either the first follow-up to a novel, or a subsequent follow-up to a series that I started and never finished. And the first one we're looking at is one that I've been promising since before I looked at the first book in the series. William Shatner's Star Trek books are insane, but just based on the Ashes of Eden, you would never know that. They don't start to get nuts until the second novel, The Return. And I promised that we'd look at it at some time in the future last year. And despite this year being a big year for Star Trek, especially The Next Generation, I'm not talking about it until now, at the very end of the year, and months after all the big Star Trek milestones. Regardless, this is where we're going to start Sequel Month. But, since it's been a while since we've looked at the last book, and for some of the books we're looking at, the previous episode is so long ago that I'd rather you not go back and watch it, I'm going to do recaps of the previous book's plot. Not that this book specifically requires it, but it's also good to know where Kirk is coming from. But instead of just me talking about it, previously on The Ashes of Eden. Captain James Tiberius Kirk takes the Enterprise A on its final mission. Following the installation of an old rival, Angevard Drake, as the head of Starfleet Command, Kirk retires and is enlisted by a mysterious half-Klingon, half-Romulan woman named Taylani to help save her planet Chal from dissidents, and in return, she will share with him the planet's secret, eternal youth. With the help of Montgomery Scott, Kirk leaves with Taylani to use the Enterprise as the first step in a planetary defense system. Drake calls in the remaining former Enterprise crew to track Kirk down for crimes that Drake believes he is perpetrating. By the end, the Enterprise crew discover that Drake was the one who had committed crimes, and the Enterprise A is destroyed over Chal, with Kirk learning that it's the planet's inhabitants' genetics that cause the eternal youth and not the planet. Kirk leaves at the end because his life is in Starfleet and prepares to attend the launch of the newly commissioned USS Enterprise B. Anyway, let's see if the second entry of Shatner's Star Trek trilogy delivers on the craziness, and check out The Return. Oh, and if you're wondering why I haven't promoted myself to captain, apparently you need a ship to be a captain, and Starfleet rejected my request for a registry number for the USS Bookcase. For the record, it would be NCC 30812. Anyway, let's get to the review. The cover is... No, you know what? Turn the camera back on. See this? See this cover? This is how you do a Star Trek cover. Not these BS publicity photo Jerry Ryan overlaid on blue Borg cube covers. This is minimalist but still tells you all you need to know. It's Kirk and Picard, similar to the Generations poster, but now they're on equal footing instead of Picard being lower than Kirk. A planet is in the middle between them, emitting an orange glow, which, if you assume that Spectrum War is canonical within the Kelvin timeline, which it's not, but bear with me, means that not only does Mogo, the living planet, exist in Star Trek, and is a Green Lantern, but Mogo is also a Time Lord and is regenerating. A DC Comics, Star Trek, and Doctor Who crossover, which, when you think about it logistically, is possible because of both the Star Trek X-Men crossover, the Superman vs. Spider-Man comic, and Assimilation Squared, which crossed over Doctor Who and Star Trek, would be pretty awesome. Someone should write that. We've got the Star Trek logo at the top, and at the bottom we've got Shatner's name in the title, The Return. And the tagline of the book is right between Picard and Kirk. Legends never die. Legends never die? Someone should tell that to Greg Berlanti, because so far with what happened to Captain Cold and Professor Stein, legends in fact do die. And yes, I'm still broken up about that. Let's just get to the story. Our story picks up where the Ashes of Eden left off, with Spock looking over Kirk's grave on Veridian 3, as Starfleet is quickly trying to pick up the pieces of the Enterprise D before the pre-warp people of Veridian 4 discover it once they manage to do interplanetary travel. Spock notices what appears to be a transporter beam over Kirk's grave and a ship going to warp in the sky. His logical half dismisses it as illogical, but his human half definitely wants to believe that Kirk's journey will never end. At the salvage site, something happens and the Starfleet personnel are being attacked, but communications die before Riker can get a straight answer. He rushes over, primarily to save Deanna Troi, who he's back together with in this novel, and when he arrives, he saves the day by detonating 2 demolition torpedoes. When someone asks Riker why someone would attack the site, or what they wanted, Riker has no answer. Meanwhile, Spock notices the rocks around Kirk's gravesite cave in. The body is gone. And I don't think that you can become a Force ghost that late after you die. In orbit, the Avatar of Tomed, captained by Salatrell, revel in their victory of securing their target, and quickly set upon the next phase. On the covert USS Monitor, Picard and Dr. Crusher are doing a covert mission against the Borg, due to Picard's knowledge of the Borg, which is weird, considering that Starfleet didn't want Picard anywhere near the Borg in first contact. But that's quickly resolved when it's explained that they need the Borg to think that he's Locutus, so that they can get their commando team in unseen. When they land for the mission, an outpost that had been assimilated, Picard even sees that they assimilated 2 Dobermans that had been pets of the people stationed there. Wow, Borg dogs. I'd probably let them assimilate me because I'd be too busy petting them. Then again, in my experience, they probably wouldn't be very good at that.
We are the Borg. All of your technological and biological distinctiveness will be added to our own. You will be a another dog.
Speaking of the Borg, the Romulans are working with the Borg in this endeavor involving Kirk, injecting his body with nanites in an attempt to bring him back to life. Spock makes his way over to the crashed Enterprise D saucer section to use one of their computers to go over Kirk's personnel file, to refresh himself on anyone who might have known that Kirk would return to this specific planet, since the operation was swift and organized. Spock also maintains that due to previous mind melds with Kirk, he has known since the Enterprise B's launch that Kirk wasn't dead, because he hasn't felt it yet, and even now he still hasn't. Kirk wakes up on a holodeck with amnesia, and Salatrell tells him that he's been wronged by an enemy. And the name of that enemy is Jean-Luc Picard.
Damn you, Picard, you follow the prompt directive so precisely, you made us all look bad.
We also find out that Salatrell is the granddaughter of the Romulan commander from Balance of Terror, which means that we have yet another secret member of Spock's family to worry about. I'm starting to think at this point he has more secret family members than Superman does. Salatrell sets Kirk off on killing Picard, and he goes after Worf, who's on a Klingon retreat to find out where Picard is. Salatrell orders him to kill Worf, but he refuses to, showing that he still has some doubts over his identity. She then sends him into a holodeck simulation of Picard killing his wife and daughter, but Kirk's own memories begin to fester as he shouts out that a Klingon bastard killed his son. Data and Geordi are off on a mission, and Data is starting to adapt to his emotion chip, giving us some fun comedy with Data trying out profanity, like Spock did in The Voyage Home. During the mission, Kirk shows up, again demanding Picard, but Geordi and Data don't give him any information, nor do they see his face at first because they're on an icy tundra planet in EV suits. Kirk intends to leave Geordi for dead, but Data manages to fight back, and deduces that Kirk is Romulan, but Kirk shows Data his face before knocking Data out and fleeing, though he repairs a fault in Geordi's suit before he goes. The Borg envoy to the Romulans, Vox, tells Salatrell that Kirk has 7 days before the Borg nanoprobes they use to bring him back to life completely take over, giving us Tiberius of Borg. As aboard Deep Space Nine, Data informs Riker and Spock that the assailant was James Kirk. Riker is incredulous to the whole thing, refusing to believe that Kirk could be brought back from total death, though Spock informs him that it's not too far off from possible given his own experience. And really, Riker, considering all the crazy stuff you've seen, this is where you draw the line? And to corroborate that, Dr. Bashir tells Riker that without a shadow of a doubt, the man who attacked Worf was James T. Kirk, based on DNA evidence. They figure, based on the weapon he used and circumstantial evidence, that the Romulans are behind Kirk's reanimation, and Riker immediately accuses Spock of having something to do with it, considering his work with the reunificationist movement, though Troy quickly calms him down. As Kirk comes to grips with his false identity and exactly who he is and what his purpose is, Spock is determined to find out what happened to his oldest friend, as the former Enterprise D crew try to help, and Picard and Crusher continue their covert mission against the Borg. Over the course of the novel, Spock goes off to Romulus to find answers, but ends up being captured by the Borg, as Picard and Crusher see on a computer screen as they continue their mission. The Borg attempt to assimilate Spock, but they can't do it. His consciousness is already within the Borg collective. How, might you ask? They don't reveal this for a while in the book, but remember back in Star Trek the Motion Picture when Spock mind-melded with V'Ger? Turns out that the advanced alien race that upgraded V'Ger, at least in the Shatnerverse, was an earlier iteration of the Borg. Kirk attacks Riker in the Bajoran Temple on Deep Space Nine, and they manage to subdue Kirk and bring him to the infirmary on the USS Challenger. They discover the nanoprobes, and Riker instates a Starfleet order to be used only when Starfleet is being invaded, and Riker believes that Kirk is the start of a Borg invasion, the one that Picard and Crusher are trying to prevent. Spock uses his status of already being a Borg to get the drones on the station to lead him to an escape ship, while Salatrell is mad that her crew is starting to doubt their mission, disintegrating her mentor in anger, which puts her people back in line. Bashir attempts to remove the Borg implant, but he needs help. Help from someone who knows Jim Kirk better than anyone, and knows things he wouldn't even tell his bartender. Dr. Leonard McCoy, who is just as crotchety and snippy as he always is. Kirk has a hallucination while he's out where he sees Sarek, an after effect of the mind meld from Star Trek III, but eventually returns to consciousness alongside his friends in the 24th century, having recovered all his memories once again. Though Troy still senses anger coming from Kirk whenever Picard is mentioned, so they have Worf stand guard, just in case. McCoy is still trying to save Kirk, cause despite the fact that the probe is out, those nanites are still gonna kill him in a week, and McCoy is trying to theorize to save Kirk once again. A Borg ship shows up carrying Spock, who based on his experiences believes that Picard is in league with the Borg and tells Riker of such, though Riker is hesitant to believe it. Then Picard shows up and tells Riker that Spock is the traitor, as he's part of the collective too. And Marcia has dates with 2 boys on the same night. What a disaster! Troy knows that they're both telling the truth, that neither of them are behind it, and Kirk calls the Romulans, since a bit of programming remained, and then we get what we always wanted. Or at least what I always wanted. Not just Kirk and Picard, but Kirk versus Picard. They fight, ending up in a holodeck where Picard tries to confuse Kirk by simulating the Enterprise D's bridge, but Kirk sees through it and simulates the original Enterprise, no bloody A, B, C, or D, or NX-01. They continue to fight, with Picard being locked out of the ship's actual systems. Picard, of course, tries to take the diplomatic way out and tries to reason with Kirk. But this is Kirk we're talking about, so Kirk flying leg kick. Spock arrives to defuse it and mind melds with Kirk to remove the programming, along with imparting the residuals of his mind meld with Picard, so Kirk no longer wants to kill Picard. They managed to get a hold of the special Black Ops ship that was being used for the covert mission, the USS Monitor, which the captain agrees to relinquish and rechristen Enterprise. And Kirk and Picard, along with Spock, McCoy, Riker, Worf, Data, LaForge, Crusher, and Troy go off to the Borg homeworld for a final attack. Though Spock takes formal command because neither of the captains will take command from the other. Salatrell begins defending the central node, and all looks grim for the Enterprise crew, but Kirk has Data execute a risky maneuver that takes out Salatrell's ship in one fell swoop. They head in for the final mission. The best option is to ram the entire ship into the node, but Kirk, knowing that he doesn't have a lot of time left, volunteers to go down to destroy it by hand, and Picard goes with him. While down there, Picard uses an interface to reconnect to the collective and is almost Locutus again, but Kirk saves him, and then they realize what they have to do. Someone has to pull a lever to destroy the node. They agonize over it, but in the end, Kirk tosses his comm badge at Picard and beams him out of there, once again dying by making a difference. But, in the final pages of the book, while Kirk is back with Sarek in his dream state, he knows that there's going to be one more mission. You know, I never could hit that note. We'll be right back. I need more practice. And we're back. Maybe I'll be able to hit that note on the 50th anniversary. Like I said in The Ashes of Eden, Shatner has a great handle on all the characters, though he excels at the Next Generation crew as well, despite the fact that he'd have never presumably read a script for the Next Generation apart from Generations, which wasn't their best outing. How much of that is the Reeves-Stevenses and how much is Shatner, I don't know, but he seems like a pretty hands-on author. All of the characters felt like they did on the show, and their personalities are spot on. Especially Data. It's easy to write regular Data with the regular android stuff, but to write Data with emotion while still managing to get his personality out there is a daunting task, and one that Shatner manages to complete with flying colors. And we get to see crotchety old McCoy, logical old Spock, and Kirk back together again in the 24th century. Kirk is written expertly. Duh. And his arc of trying to find out who he is, and his conflicting memories, his feelings for Salatrell, it's all written very well. If there's one character Shatner understands more than anyone, it's Kirk. We even get a lot of good arcs from everyone else. We have a focus on Data and his emotions, and Geordi dealing with it. It's great because Geordi and Data are friends, though apart from Mr. Tricorder, we didn't get to see a lot of Geordi dealing with the aftermath of the emotion chip following Generations and the next few films, so it's nice to see that explored here. And Picard's arc with the Borg, while explored better in First Contact, is also done well here. The idea that he's being dragged back in was something that we never really got to see. He never sank back to Locutus, he just started Ahabbing because he feared that. Spock is also written expertly, especially with his refusal to believe Kirk is gone, because Kirk did the same for him once. Though, of course, there is the fact that Kirk did believe he was dead and left him behind on Genesis, only going back because Sarek ordered him to and McCoy was being drawn to his Katra, but I kid. The fact that Shatner and Nimoy were such good friends in real life, I feel like Nimoy's respect and care for Spock that he always adhered to rubbed off on Shatner, so he took the same care, as if Spock and Nimoy are one and the same. I feel like Crusher was wasted, and can't think of anything she did in the book that left a lasting impact on me. On the same token, Riker is... well, he's kind of a dick, but I feel like maybe he was kind of a dick in The Next Generation anyway, and I just didn't notice it as much because I like his character. Or maybe Shatner just couldn't handle having more than one Lothario in the book. Has Riker always been a jackass? You make the call. One thing I enjoyed is that Troy is actually used well here. Considering that a lot of writers sort of forget Troy or just use her for the various "I sense this" bullcrap, especially in books where she's not the main character, Shatner actually utilizes her in a lot of the action. While Troy's not my favorite for some legitimate and some admittedly irrational reasons, Troy actually has a purpose here, being used to help diffuse situations like a counselor. I knew someone was going to actually make her counsel at some point. And of course, Kirk got a much more fitting death. Not stabbed by Soren, not pinned under a bridge, but he goes out saving lives, and more importantly, saving Picard's life, finishing his arc. More importantly, he went out destroying what is probably the greatest villain in all of Star Trek, so he's got that going for him as opposed to just beating Malcolm McDowell. I was a bit disappointed that we don't get resolution for Taylani in this one, but the sequel to this book pays the Taylani arc off, so I won't dwell on it. This is the Wrath of Khan of the Shatnerverse. There are a lot of these books, but this one is, I think, my absolute favorite. Mainly because of how well all of the character arcs are done. The Kirk versus Picard stuff was really well done, with Kirk having issues adapting and using the simulated Enterprise to put Picard on his footing. Sure, a team-up is great, but sometimes you want to be able to cite something to your friends and be like, "I told you Kirk could totally beat up Picard." Though the obvious rebuttal to that is, that book's non-canonical. Who am I kidding? I don't have any friends that like Star Trek. I totally have friends. The book is non-stop action. Its predecessor had an advantage that, despite us knowing that none of the main cast will die, because it takes place before Generations, the action still felt real and edge of your seat. You knew Kirk couldn't die, but what if? This one doesn't quite have it. Kirk could totally die. Spock, when the book was written, could totally die. And considering that the novels aren't even canon, and not only that, but Shatner's books are even less canon, anyone is fair game apart from the Next Generation cast. What I like is that it's not just fight scene after fight scene. We get some very emotionally tense scenes, especially between Riker and Spock while they argue over Kirk. It's actually sort of cool seeing the two first officers fighting for their captain's honors. Plus, even the fight scenes aren't just all punches and phasers. There's always a sort of logic and planning applied to each one. I especially like how when the Romulans steal Kirk's body, it's not just that Kirk's body is taken. The Romulans perform a distraction, then take it, so that the Starfleet personnel are occupied and can't interrupt. And while I loathe another revenge-driven villain, especially because Angravard Drake's motive was revenge in the last book, I like how it ties back into the original series, just like how Killing Time had the Romulan captain from the other Romulan episode. While a Romulan-Borg alliance doesn't make a lot of sense from the Borg's perspective, why not just assimilate all of Romulus using that warbird? It's still a cool concept, though one I feel was sort of let down by Kirk just taking out Salatril's ship in one maneuver. It's frigging awesome and cool, but a tad too easy. Still awesome, though. Plus, the scenes of Kirk attacking the Next Generation crew and demanding Picard, and then to Data demanding his identity, were extremely effective in imparting Kirk's emotions, and I actually felt Kirk's frustration. Plus, the wording used perfectly manages to impart the visuals onto us. Yeah, it's Star Trek, yeah, I can call up the image of the interior of a Borg cube in my mind, but we get the stealthy USS Monitor, the Romulan Borg ship, the central node. I could see all of it, and it was glorious. Shatner's very good at visual language. I felt the same way reading his memoir up till now. I was able to visualize myself at various points in his life that I otherwise have no frame of reference for. And even though I have a frame of reference for Star Trek locations, it's still very visual and very amazing. The book is phenomenal. Another classic from Shatner, and one I definitely enjoy more than The Ashes of Eden, which isn't to say I dislike Taylania or anything like that. I just like the crossover stuff here more than the straight original series stuff in the last book. Plus, Kirk of Borg. I mean, it really can't get any better than that. If you're a Star Trek fan, I highly recommend this book. And you really don't even have to read The Ashes of Eden before it, though I recommend it, because it leads into it and informs on Kirk's feelings and Generations a little better than just going from Star Trek VI alone. If you're not a Star Trek fan, well, why are you watching this video? Wait, do some of you just watch these videos for me? Regardless, if you're a fan of Shatner's writing from, say, Tech War, and have a basic knowledge of Star Trek and Next Gen, you might actually like this book, even if you aren't the biggest fan, just because of how well written it is. And that was The Return. Was it good? The Return is everything that Star Trek Generations should have been and more. We get Kirk, we get Spock, we get Picard, and we get the scenes that we always wanted. It's like that Booster Gold storyline where Dan Garrett, Ted Kord, and Jaime Reyes got to interact with each other. Sure, the single crossovers with McCoy and Spock on The Next Generation were great, but nothing can beat having the big three back together, interacting with the crew of my absolute favorite Trek series. But the best part is, the story doesn't end here. But that's a story for another video. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of the Literary Lair, you can hit that subscribe button. And if you have any comments or complaints about the video, you can put those in the comment section below. Oh, and if you want to be notified of new uploads, you can hit that bell icon. And if you enjoyed this video, show it to your friends and share it around the internet. And maybe consider supporting the show on Patreon. See you next time when Sequel Month continues with our 148th episode. And we take a trip to a lost world. Damn it, I just gave away the book. How much of that is the Reeves Stevenses and how much is Shatner, I don't know. But he seems like a hands-on author, so